Hi there and welcome to the Richie Allen television show in association with davidike.com and Beyond Vision Media. I'm Richie Allen and it's lovely to have your company. Thanks for choosing the programme. I just want to say something before we carry on. We've actually had a bit of correspondence to the show, which is terrific for us. It's nice to get a couple of emails. A couple of comments made last week about a t-shirt I wore last week on the show, a green thing. And because there's a moniker on the front of it here, this Pierre Cardin thing, or Pierre Cardin, I don't know how you pronounce it. I should know, really. No, I'm not being sponsored by that company. I wish I were. I really do. But it's a 3 for £10 special in a local sports shop in Manchester City Centre. That's where it comes from. I want to say a quick hello to Jean Ann Crowley and one or two others who sent me those emails. Now, moving on. A lot to get through this week. Shortly, I'll talk a little bit about what has happened in Greece. We'll get into the Iranian nuclear talks, the P5+1 and all of that as well. And I've got plenty to say on George Osborne and the budget announced in the United Kingdom yesterday. Before we do that though, this has been an interesting week because it saw the anniversary of the 7th of July bombings in London, England, which resulted in catastrophic loss of life. 52 people were killed and more than 700 people were injured. Many of those people were in fact very seriously injured. And that's a terrible, terrible thing. Anybody who's listened to my radio programmes over the years will know that while I tend to be sceptical about a lot of so-called alleged terror events, I don't come down as hard on one side as I have done on what happened on the 7th of July 2005. I believe implicitly that agents working for the British government or working outside it, maybe working inside it, were the people behind what happened on that day. But maybe that's for another day. Like I said, it's been spoken of quite a lot in the independent media this week. What I do want to tell you though is something which is a fact and which not a single news network or newspaper mentioned this week. And that is that while all of this was unfolding on the 7th of July 2005, a man called Peter Power went on to become the terror czar of the United Kingdom, was working for a private security company, a contractor, which was given obviously a contract by the British government to run a terror drill on the very morning of the attacks. And the terror drill was going to simulate attacks in the exact same places that the attacks took place for real on the morning of the 7th of July. That sounds absolutely incredible. And many people watching this show today will not actually know it. But Peter Power spoke to the media on the day of the attacks. And I want you to watch one such interview. This is Peter Power. Take a look at this.
Today we were running an exercise for a company, bearing in mind I'm now in the private sector, and we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team, and the most peculiar thing was we based our scenario on the simultaneous attacks on the underground and mainline station. So we had to suddenly switch an exercise from fictional to real. And one of the first things is, get that bureau number. When you have a list of people missing, tell them. And so it took a long time.
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Advisor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do.
You've got to suspend your disbelief to previously unimagined levels for human beings to accept that it's just a coincidence that on the morning of one of Britain's worst ever terrorist attacks, security forces were conducting a drill which imagined the exact same scenario which unfolded. It's utter bullshit. It's incredible. No man, woman or child, however intelligent, can tell me that that's acceptable. It simply is not. Of course, it happened on September the 11th, and of course it happened in Boston during the Boston Marathon bombing again. A drill being carried out at the same time, imagining a similar scenario. It's time that people woke up. Maybe more on that in future programmes. Educate yourselves. That's what I say, educate yourselves. Incidentally, I have asked Peter Power on numerous occasions over the years to come and talk to me about what was going on the 7th of July, but he will not speak to anybody. In fact, apart from doing a show for the BBC called Conspiracy Theory, he never spoke again to anybody about what happened on that day. Anyway, moving on. This week, the British Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, at the House of Commons, or in the House of Commons, announced the budget. Basically, government spending, what it would be spent on, government savings and all of that. On previous Richie Allen TV programmes, we've gotten into talking about why or how he was going to make £12 billion worth of savings from the welfare budget. And I will get to that now in a couple of minutes' time. Before that, though, I want to read you from The Guardian this week. And this is The Guardian. It's an exclusive report by The Guardian. Taxpayers are handing businesses £93 billion a year, which is a transfer of more than £3,500 from each household in Britain. That's amazing. The total emerges from the first comprehensive account of what Britons give away to companies in grants, in subsidies and in tax breaks. Like I said, published in The Guardian. Find it, theguardian.com. Many of the companies receiving the largest public grants over the past few years previously paid little or zero corporation tax. The analysis shows this quite clearly. Again, you've got to go and look at this in the Guardian newspaper. They include some of the best known names in Britain, such as Amazon, Ford and Nissan. The figures intensify the pressure on George Osborne, the Chancellor, just as he put the finishing touches to his budget. And at the heart of Wednesday's announcement this week were his plans to cut £12 billion more from the social welfare bill. Yet, says The Guardian, that sum is less than the £14.5 billion given to companies in direct grants and subsidies alone. So on the one hand, he wants to screw the worst off people in the country, people who are fucking starving, people who can't sleep at night, and I'm talking about people who work 35 hours a week but can't make enough to feed their families. On the one hand, we're going to screw you and take away tax credits from you. But on the other hand, we're going to give grants and subsidies to companies who don't pay corporation tax. And The Guardian didn't factor in that money. They only factored in the money that is given in grants, not the money that they're not getting by not charging corporation tax to these bastards. It's truly, truly heartless. He talked about a rise in the minimum wage to £9. That's for Londoners by 2020, not for people living in other parts of the country. It's a nonsense. When you take inflation into account, price rises and all of that, it won't make a blind bit of difference. He is hammering people. He's taken housing benefit away from people before they're 21 or 23 or 25. What difference does it make? It's forcing more and more and more people to food banks, to abject poverty. He's destroyed disability living allowance in this country. Again, the least of us, and I don't mean mentally, the least of us, the worst off in society being hammered by this heartless bastard. All the figures are out there. Find them yourself. I'm not going to repeat them and waste valuable time here going into it. I will say this, on the way to the studio this morning, both ITN News and BBC News interviewed Osborne and completely humiliated themselves by throwing softball questions to him about what he was achieving with it and what he was achieving, what he would achieve with it. The Sun called him a bloody hero. This is the Sun newspaper in Britain, have labelled him a hero for hammering the poor people in Britain. This is the same Sun newspaper, by the way, who, after the Hillsborough disaster in April 1989, when football supporters were killed because of incompetence by the police and by stewards at Hillsborough Football Stadium in Sheffield, this is the same Sun newspaper who lied and said that Liverpool supporters were pissing on the dead, were pickpocketing the dead. So we won't believe the Sun. They've never paid a penny in compensation to the victims of the families of those people who died in Hillsborough. But back to George Osborne. Remember now, corporate welfare is part of what David Cameron calls his government's policy to make the UK the most open, welcoming, business-friendly country in the world. What a load of crock. Channel 4 News this week, to their credit, revealed that George Osborne, his family, in fact George Osborne's family business, made a £6 million profit in a property deal with a developer based in a tax haven. If you don't believe me, have a look at this clip.
Now, before the iron gates and luxury homes went up behind me, this land used to be owned by a company called Osborne and Little. You might have heard of it. It's the family business of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. Now, we've discovered the Chancellor's family business sold this land for development to a secretive offshore company. A company that could have legally avoided a fortune in British taxes. For years, the Chancellor has been a vociferous critic of offshore tax avoidance.
I regard tax evasion and indeed aggressive tax avoidance as morally repugnant.
And the message is very simple. If you're hiding your money offshore, we are coming to get you.
And just a few weeks ago, during the election campaign, he trotted out the same line in an interview with Channel 4 News.
Well, people can judge me by my track record. In budget after budget, I've taken aggressive action against people who aggressively avoid all their taxes.
But despite all his strong words, it seems his own family firm had no problem teaming up with an offshore company for a £6 million property deal.
The hypocrisy here is, it's devastating, really. You know, you've heard me talk about him talking about benefit scroungers, people not paying their way, corporation tax not being charged to some of the biggest companies in the world and all of that. I want you to remember a couple of years back, David Cameron went public with very serious, very savage, I thought at the time, criticism of entertainers like Gary Barlow and Jimmy Carr, particularly Jimmy Carr. Remember, he was complaining about them hiding money in tax havens. Now look, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's right when celebrities, when filmmakers, when singer-songwriters, when they earn lots and lots and lots of money and they use legal but immoral tax shelters around the world to avoid paying taxes. I don't like it and it shouldn't happen. But the hypocrisy of particularly David Cameron. First of all, before we get into Cameron, have a look at Cameron talking about Jimmy Carr.
Some of these schemes where people are parking huge amounts of money offshore and taking loans back to just minimise their tax rates, it is not morally acceptable. And I put it like this, you know, think of all those people who work hard, who pay their taxes, and out of that post-tax income save up to go and see Jimmy Carr. He's taking that money and stuffing it into something where he doesn't have to pay taxes. That is not fair. That is not right.
So you heard Cameron there talking about Jimmy Carr. What's absolutely disgusting about this is that Cameron's father, Ian, who's dead now and he's not here to defend himself, and I'm not going to suggest for a minute that he broke the law because he didn't. This is the tragedy of it. This is what people don't understand about it. His father was a positive, a certifiable genius at I nearly said laundering, then he would be a criminal. He was never a criminal. His father was a genius at hiding money overseas and doing it legally. Have a look at this.
But we've discovered that Mr. Cameron's own father held assets offshore. Assets left to his family after his death 5 years ago. At this courthouse behind me here in St Helier, we found this. It's a document called a grant of probate, and it's attached to the English will of none other than Ian Cameron, David Cameron's father. So the real question is, why did the Prime Minister's father need to file separate documents here in Jersey? The document, which Channel 4 News obtained last Friday, shows that in March 2011, the Royal Court in Jersey accepted the will of Ian Cameron. It appointed David Cameron's mother Mary, his brother Alex, and his sister Tanya as executors of his estate in Jersey. The attached will states that if Mr. Cameron's mother did not survive her husband, any assets not specifically itemised will be divided between David Cameron and his sisters in equal share. Lawyers have told us that that would apply to any assets in Jersey. But it doesn't give any details of the value of the estate, and that's because the laws in Jersey mean the numbers can be kept secret.
So that clip about Ian Cameron was from a few years back. Again, the sickening hypocrisy of these people. These are the most unconscionable people alive. They will starve people to death. And by the way, the Work and Pension Secretary, Ian Duncan Smith, could be seen laughing and whooping and screaming in the background while Cameron was announcing this week, this Wednesday, the devastating cuts that are going to drive families further and further to the edge and drive them to food banks and drive them to despair and to sickness and to death. And these guys criticising the Daily Mirror for publishing a story some weeks back, alleging that thousands of people have been driven to suicide because of the cuts the austerity forced on the worst people in this country. They punish the poor and blame benefit scroungers for the austerity they're forcing on people. But look, things can be done about it. There are groups out there like UK Uncut, check them out. And there are other groups trying to raise awareness about this and trying to call people to action to stop this overwhelming injustice. Take a look at this cartoon.
Tax avoidance by multinational corporations is destroying our national services. The NHS is bleeding with the worst deficit in 66 years since it was founded. Our police force and fire services have been ravaged by drastic cuts in government spending. Simultaneously, some of the world's largest companies are avoiding billions of tax on UK revenue. The government can end this injustice with a simple MAT tax applied on multinational corporation revenue that permanently closes all tax avoidance loopholes. This will bring in billions of new tax revenue, save jobs, and enhance our national services. Join the campaign at crowdcrusader.com, the world's first crowd action platform. By crowdfunding a national media campaign using the power of TV, newspapers and the internet, we can create the level of public awareness and pressure that will force the government to take action. Join crowdcrusader.com to unite with the crowd and create positive change.
Small business owner, when do you know things aren't quite right within your business? We don't mean obvious things like running out of money or your van failing its MOT. We mean things that you might miss, such as, are you paying the correct amount of rates? Are the fuel bills you put in reasonable? Well, here at Accounts Direct, we know instantly if there's an issue, we alert you of it, and we let you know some possible solutions. If you'd like more information on our alert system, please visit www.accountsdirect.biz. Accounts Direct. Accountants on your side.
Welcome back to the show. Don't forget to check out liveleak.com. Terrific resource for news and information you don't get on the mainstream media. And every Thursday at 10:30 p.m, that's British summertime, an outstanding TV show airs live called The Live Leak Show. Check out Evil Marty J, Hayden Hewitt. Who am I forgetting, Hayden? I always forget to mention somebody. John's lovely. He reads out the emails, doesn't he? John's lovely, a lovely guy too. It's a terrific show. It's funny, it's biting, it's cutting, it's controversial, and it's interactive. So you can tweet at what is going on, you can email it, you can even speak to the host, Hayden Hewitt. It's good fun, it really is. And as I said, it's got a very serious side to it as well. Of course, davidicke.com/headlines. Check that out. And the Richie Allen Show, the radio. I'll tell you more about that later on. Right, let's get to Iran and the nuclear talks. Iran has claimed for a while that it wants to enrich uranium for its nuclear program, its domestic energy program. That's what it says. The United States and Israel says it doesn't. They say that Iran wants to bomb. Ironically, when the United States and Israel have the bomb, and Israel won't even admit to it, they have the bomb. I'll talk more about Iran in a minute, but that's what they're saying anyway. So the P5+1 nuclear talks are ongoing. There was supposed to be a deadline. The deadline keeps moving. They're talking. They're getting places. The talks are productive. Blah, 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 blah. While all of this is going on, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Israeli Prime Minister, there he is. Look at him. He's lovely. His own YouTube, I had to look at this, I didn't believe it. His own YouTube channel is publishing cartoons. And one of the cartoons equates ISIS, the maddest, most murderous terrorist group alive, with the Islamic State of Iran, and suggests that the West is going to allow ISIS to get nukes. Imagine Islamic State building atomic bombs. Well, maybe it's not that hard to imagine, alleges Bibi Netanyahu. Have a look at the cartoon.
Islamic State sweeps through the Middle East, killing anyone who isn't exactly like them. Imagine how dangerous Islamic State would be if it had armored divisions, fighter jets, and ballistic missiles. Imagine Islamic State building atomic bombs. Well, maybe it's not that hard to imagine. The Islamic State of Iran, like ISIS, just much bigger.
Look, Israel has been trotting out the same tired fucking bullshit for years about Iran. The Iranians support terror. They support Hezbollah. I hate that. They support Hamas. Yeah, look, there's no doubt that elements within the Iranian government have been sticking their grubby paws in the situation in Israel and the Gaza Strip and elsewhere. But are we going to allow Israel? Are we going to allow the United States throw stones at another country for interfering in the affairs of another country? No, we're fucking well not. It's as simple as that. And that brings me to President Barack Obama, who isn't at the talks, of course. John Kerry, who can't ride a bicycle from A to fucking B without falling off it and breaking his leg. What is it with these people? Bono was the exact same. He's there. Obama isn't there. He pontificates from the White House press room or gets his press secretary to do it. Obama likes to rewrite history. Now, I have searched high and low, and I've even been listening to AHA while I've been doing it, for a clip that I played a couple of years ago on the radio show and a couple of months ago on the radio show of Obama talking about the United States' relationship with Iran, but I've not been able to find the clip. But every time he talks about it, Obama slips in that the United States and Iran have been having problems since 1979. I shit you not. That's what he says. We've had protracted difficulties with the nation state of Iran since 1979. You've got to be fucking kidding me, right? 1979. This is serious shit, this. And it terrifies me because I'm a history and English graduate. History's important to me. You don't just airbrush fucking history and forget what really happened between the United States and Iran. But before I get into that, I want to show you an example of the airbrushing of history. A few weeks ago, and I got into this on the radio program, the president of Venezuela, a guy called Nicolas Maduro, he was complaining that agents in Caracas, Hayden, I didn't write this out, Caracas is the capital of Venezuela, isn't it? I've got to ask. It is, isn't it? We think it is, yeah. And I'm not taking a piss there, I do forget sometimes. History in English, not geography. Yes, Caracas is the capital. So Maduro was saying, look, I've arrested guys because they were working, I found that they were working within my capital, within my country, to undermine democracy, working on behalf of the United States. Now, I don't care what you think of Maduro. I don't care what you thought of Chavez before him. He's fucking right. They are. It's what they do. It's their default position. So he's arrested a few of them. He was bitching about it, and he said the United States is trying to overthrow him, which they are. They are. And they quite possibly had something to do with the health problems suffered by Hugo Chavez. But I can't prove it. Anyway, Richie, get on with it. So, Jen Psaki, a press officer working within the White House press room, was sent out to face the media to basically say that this Maduro guy, this is all conspiracy theory. It's not our policy to interfere in the workings of other governments and the workings of other countries. Have a look at this.
Your response. These latest accusations, like all previous such accusations, are ludicrous. As a matter of long-standing policy, the United States does not support political transitions by non-constitutional means. Political transitions must be democratic, constitutional, peaceful, and legal. We've seen many times that the Venezuelan government tries to distract from its own actions by blaming the United States or other members of the international community for events inside Venezuela. These efforts reflect a lack of seriousness on the part of the Venezuelan government to deal with the grave situation it faces.
The U.S. has The U.S. has a long-standing practice of not promoting. What did you say? How long-standing is that? I would. In particular, in South and Latin America, that is not a long-standing practice.
Well, my point here, Matt, without getting into history, is that we do not support, we have no involvement with, and these are ludicrous accusations.
In this specific case.
Correct.
But if you go back not that long ago, during your lifetime, even. This is
The
not
last
that
21
long
years?
Well done. Touche. But, I mean, look, does long-standing mean 10 years in this case? I mean, what
Matt,
is,
my intention was to speak to
I
the
understand.
specific reports.
But you said it's a long-standing U.S. practice, and I'm not so sure how. It depends on what your definition of long-standing
We will.
is.
Okay.
Holy fucking shit. Our long-standing policy is not to interfere, said pathological lawyer Jen Psaki. And this is the few. Now, you know, if you listen to the radio programme, and if you watch liveleak.com and if you're on YouTube, you'll have seen this. But this is what I'm talking about. You see, this isn't just hilarious. The journalist has a go at her. She flirts with him a bit. Yeah, it's funny. It isn't funny. It isn't funny because students are going to school in America and they don't know what happened in 1953 in Iran. Okay? When the CIA, security forces in Britain, working for fucking BP, overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, who was the democratically elected president of the Iranian Republic. That's a fact. That's what happened. And we've got problems in Iran now. There's no doubt about it. It has human rights abuse issues there. It certainly does. Listen, I'm not going to get into a pissing contest. So does the United States. In fact, I would argue the human rights abuses committed in America dwarf those committed in Iran or in North Korea even. Be a bit controversial there. But they love to throw that out there. Yes, there are problems in Iran. Don't say you're gay in Iran in certain places. Jesus, please don't. Don't. You know, there are issues there. But in 1953, after he'd nationalised Iranians' oil assets, it was a thriving democracy. Go online, go and look at passé news images. Look at it. Women walking around wearing skirts. Women driving. This was an absolute example of democracy in the region until we threw him out. How dare the President of the United States and his minions, how dare they look you in the fucking eye and say that we've only had problems with the Iranians since 1979. Here's a clip that explains the history of CIA coups. Have a look at it. So just look at John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It's a book that gets mentioned regularly. The whole thing is there. He basically took part in those coups, but he did it in Central and South America in the 1970s. And the coups carry on to this day. Libya and Ukraine, to name two. Find out who Victoria Newland is. Find out who Natalie Jaresko is. Don't take it from me, because I'll tell you this, I'm sick to fucking death of saying this day in, day out. So you find out for yourself who these people are. The finance minister of Ukraine. They're trying to get rid of Assad in Syria, as you know. He's a bad man, Rich. He might well be. I don't give a shit. It's a sovereign nation. We're not interested in whether he's a bad man or not. Anyway. So on the overthrow of Iranian President Mohammad Mossadegh, here's the CNN clip from from a year or so back, where they talk about the classified CIA documents which basically admitted the whole bloody thing. Have a look.
It's actually been an open secret for decades, but for the first time now, the CIA has released documents that show its role in the 1953 coup. That is the coup that toppled Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, had moved to nationalize oil production in Iran. Well, the U.S. was concerned at the time that that would mean a victory for the Soviets in the Cold War. So shortly after his election, the CIA began to plan his overthrow, teaming up with Britain's MI6.
Now, the CIA, we've seen it spelling out its involvement in a series of newly declassified documents. These are the actual documents marked confidential, top secret, eyes only. It's the stuff of crime and mystery and spy novels. This one talks about the security implications of CIA letters of commendation for those who served in that operation codenamed TP Ajax. And this one, dated July 22nd, 1953, almost a month before the coup, it talks about preparing an official American statement to follow a successful coup.
We live in a lunatic asylum. I speak all the time to David Icke because he's a mate and because his website carries the Richie Allen radio show. And I sometimes send David clips. Many times he's seen them already. He's got people who work with him on the website for the headlines page. Check out davidicke.com/headlines. And he will come back to me and joke and say, the world is an open-air lunatic asylum, Richie. And you know, he's right, David Icke, because we live in a world where those people who perpetrate mayhem, death and destruction on an hourly basis, not a daily basis, on an hourly basis, they can dictate to countries like Iran, who's not attacked or threatened anybody in over 300 years. They can dictate to them what they can and what they can't do, which are domestic nuclear power. Yes, you might argue it's not a good idea, Richie, to have, nuclear weapons. No, it isn't. Well, let those who have them then fucking disarm them. Let the United States, Israel, who doesn't even admit they have them, Pakistan, India, North Korea, let them decommission those arms before you start telling Iran what to do. For what it's worth. Not because I'm a sucker, not because I'm naive. I believe the Iranians. I believe them. I believe their motives are to develop nuclear power facilities for their domestic energy program, not to develop an atomic bomb. If I'm wrong, what of it? What the fuck's the difference in 2015 if they get one? What difference does it make? Because the biggest terrorist nation in the region is Israel, not Iran, and Israel has one. And that ain't anti-Semitism or racism. Israel commits more human rights abuses per fucking square mile than Iran or any other country around them, he says controversially. But I believe it. And while all this is going on, just to lighten it up a little bit, Barack Obama, during a press briefing this week in the old East Room in the White House, said that, whether he meant it or not, he said that the US were engaged in training ISIL. Have a look at this clip.
Was moving too slowly, but the fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
Right, he didn't mean to say that, but they are arming, funding and training them, of course. And I want you to look at this clip from a couple of months back from Rand Paul. Ron Paul's son, Senator Rand Paul. He's on the Council on Foreign Relations and he lays it on the line right here, talking, I think, again to CNN. Rand Paul.
So do you believe that the ISIS is a national security threat to the United States?
Well, do you know where the safe haven is? The safe haven's in Syria. So those who have been, let me finish. Because the thing is that they would not be empowered in Iraq if we were not providing safe haven in Syria by arming their allies.
So should we go to Syria? I mean, the thing is, we kind of are where we are.
No,
so
well, we are where we are because we are where we are because we armed the Syrian rebels. We have been fighting alongside Al-Qaeda fighting alongside ISIS. ISIS is now emboldened in 2 countries. But here's the anomaly. We're with ISIS in Syria. We're on the same side of the war. So those who want to get involved to stop ISIS in Iraq are allied with ISIS in Syria. That is the real contradiction to this whole policy.
Right.
Hallelujah! Absolutely hallelujah. There you have it. And I've gotten into it on this programme before. Who exactly trains, funds and arms ISIS, IS, ISIL, whatever the fuck they're calling them today? These monstrous, barbarous maniacs. And they are. If you don't believe it, go to liveleak.com. I say this and I say this now. Somebody posted a LiveLeak video on Facebook the other day. There's nothing wrong with sharing information. Be very careful when you share, particularly videos from Syria, from LiveLeak on Facebook, because kids see that stuff and they don't need to. Children really do not need to see some of the shit that ISIS are getting up to. So just bear that in mind when you're sharing stuff from liveleak.com. I'm not trying to do any harm to liveleak.com by saying that, or to affect their figure. You couldn't affect their figures. But be careful when you're sharing stuff. It's serious stuff. ISIS are mad, but they're doing what we want and when we want, and I'm not going to labour that point again. This is the Richie Allen television show in association with DavidIke.com and Beyond Vision Media. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back from that, we'll talk a little bit about Greece.
This man owns a small business. He works hard in his business. He spends his days dealing with customers, suppliers, and general aggravation. He certainly doesn't want to spend his days dealing with the VAT man as well. After all that, you'll often find him at evenings and weekends working on his books. Or not. Sound familiar? With the high levels of compliance and the severe penalties for getting it wrong, wouldn't it be better if someone else could find any problems before the taxman does? You've got better things to do with your time than worry about your books. Think of all the other things you could be doing instead of crunching numbers. Just put all your paperwork into a box and let Accounts Direct take care of everything. Bookkeeping, management, accounts, tax returns, VAT returns, payroll and more. Accounts Direct. Accountants on your side.
Welcome back to the programme. Once again, check out liveleak.com and the LiveLeak TV show every Thursday night at 10 p.m. BST. DavidIke.com/headlines. Make it your homepage. All the relevant news stories coming to you from the alternative media, the independent media and the mainstream media every single day. Really good stuff. I present a radio show Monday to Thursday on RichieAllenShow.com. That's RichieAllenShow.com. It goes out on FM radio in Europe and Fab radio here in England. It goes out on DavidIke.com as well. And it's an interesting show, it really is. So check it out if you haven't heard it before. So let's talk a bit about Greece then finally today. The heads of the European Union were warning, weren't they, that the next 5 days basically comprise the most critical moment in the EU history, as they're attempting to finally solve the problem with Maria. No, the problem with the Greek debt impasse. Leaders of all 28 member states, including David Cameron, waxing lyrical this week about how we must do a deal. The latest as we have it, and it might change in the time period that you're watching this, is that Greece have basically asked for a loan, a 3-year loan. And in return for that, they've promised to work with the European Union, the International Monetary Fund and the ECB to work on, attacking their pension reforms and attacking reforms on welfare and all sorts of stuff like that. We're told at this stage that the new Greek Finance Minister, Euclid Sakalotos, we're told that he will receive an answer from the Troika by Sunday of this week. He's the guy who famously turned up with nothing on the first day at work. He didn't give a shit. He was like, I'm here for the canapes and for the cava or the champagne. You say cava when you don't have any money. But he didn't turn up with anything. Look, I can't keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again. I predicted everything would turn out the way it has. I really did. Check out previous shows. Greece were never going to be allowed to leave the European Union, because if they did and if they thrived, which they would undoubtedly have done after the drachma was devalued by 50%, and they would have gotten some investment back into the country and nationalised their banks, the Irish, the Italians, the Spanish, the ones, they couldn't have seen that. We can't allow people to see that. It can't happen. So I'm going to finish today, nearly finish today, with a little bit of talk about Iceland. Because Iceland punished the bankers in their country. They nationalised their banks. Now remember, it's important to remember, Iceland never joined the single currency. They maintained and retained the krona. And that was vital, you see. That was vital in terms of what could be and what couldn't be done to Icelandics by the same financial institutions. I want you to have a quick look at a little clip about Iceland.
Back in 2008, the country suffered the biggest banking collapse in history. 7 years on, it's one of the best countries for business. Its GDP is on the rise and the coffers have all filled up. And in fact, there's even a budget surplus now. And inflation is at its lowest point since before the recession. Iceland's president is now giving lectures to leading business schools.
What did we do that's different? We did things that were considered absolute taboo. First of all, we let the banks fail. Secondly, we did not introduce the similar kind of austerity measures that have been almost mandatory in many other countries.
The cure was simple. Iceland let its out-of-control banking sector go bust and put the executives behind bars for manipulating the market. Though that's when the UK was handing out massive rescue packages and the White House was buying huge stakes in the country's banks. An economics professor from the University of Iceland thinks other countries should learn from this type of recovery.
With the collapse of the financial systems, instead of bailing them out, those who lent into the mess had to take responsibility instead of, as you've done with the bailout packages, where the costs of the financial bubble are transferred to ordinary people. And we were not part of we weren't part of the European Union, so there was no proper lender of last resort. Unlike Greece, Iceland had the temporary benefit of having its own currency, and we've enjoyed also a tremendous growth in tourism post-crash, which has softened the blow for much of the services in Iceland. And so the balance sheet of the Icelandic government remained relatively clean after the crash.
So there you have it, the Icelandics basically, or Icelanders maybe, explaining it themselves, why they couldn't be touched in the manner of what's happened to Ireland and to Spain, to Italy, to Greece and to Portugal. We live in debt slavery. We live in debt slavery where we must go and borrow money from financial institutions whom invent money out of thin air and decide who gets it, when and what interest they pay. The only way out of this hell is for countries like mine, the Irish, the Spanish and so on, and every other country in the Eurozone to reinstate their own currency, to take their sovereignty back, to nationalise the banks and kick these bankers out. It's the only way to go. Iceland did it, and look what's happening in their country now. Their GDP output is terrific. They're growing, and they haven't looked back. It's as simple as that. That's how we'll leave it today. Thanks for watching the programme. We ask that when you see it on Facebook, when you see it on YouTube, that you share it with other people. It's important that I'm not important, nor are the people working on the programme. But what we're saying is important. We're not megalomaniacs here. The reason why what we're saying is important is because other more learned people than us are saying it, but they're not getting a chance to say it on the mainstream media. That's why we say share it. Big thanks to Evil Marty and to Hayden Hewitt at Beyond Vision Media. Check out the Live League show every Thursday night at 10:30. Check out davidicke.com/headlines as well. I'll see you next time on the Richie Allen Television Show. Until then, look after yourself.